The transmission began as a whisper, faint, fractured syllables stretched thin across the void, yet its desperation carried more force than fleets of warships. Static cracked between the alien words, but the anguish was unmistakable. It was not a formal petition, not a diplomatic broadcast, not even a call for negotiations. It was raw pleading. Someone had screamed into the endless night and hoped something, anything, would answer. The galaxy heard, and the galaxy froze. Among the great federations, councils, and empires, there was hesitation cloaked in logic. Why intervene when the source of the attack was still unknown? Why risk fleets and soldiers when another predator might be lurking, one capable of shattering planets and silencing civilizations? The safer choice was to stay distant, mourn quietly, and continue with politics as usual. Their hesitation revealed what all species feared admitting aloud. Survival was precious, but courage was rare. There was one exception. On a small outpost orbiting a barren moon, 3 men listened as the fractured cry was decrypted and played through the command deck. The message spilled across the speakers like a funeral dirge. Commander Jarek Holt leaned forward, scarred hands tightening on the railing, his face etched by years of war. He did not look at the words displayed on the console. He did not need to. He could feel the weight of desperation in the alien cadence, and it ignited something old and relentless inside him. Beside him, Lieutenant Marcus Kane adjusted his wrist display, cool eyes scanning lines of tactical data. He was not moved by the sorrow in the voice. He was moved by the precision of the broadcast, how it carried coordinates, how it embedded schematics of orbital damage, how it carried hints of the assailant's weapons fire. Where others heard despair, Marcus heard an enemy's footprint. Sergeant Elias Ward said nothing. He stood with arms crossed, his posture relaxed yet predatory, like a soldier waiting for violence to justify itself. His face bore the same hardened calm as every battlefield he had endured. The cry for help was not shocking to him. Worlds burned all the time. What mattered was who had lit the fire and whether they still drew breath. The 3 men had known each other long enough that silence spoke as clearly as dialogue. Jarek broke it first, his voice low and graveled. They asked for help. Everyone else will look away. Marcus replied without glancing up. They aren't asking us specifically. That transmission was blind. Could have landed in anyone's lap. And it landed in ours, Jarek said. His words were not a debate. They were a verdict. Elias finally shifted, letting the faintest smirk carve across his mouth. So we're going hunting. No proclamation. No debate of morality or ethics. Just the inevitability of response. For where others hesitated, humans did not. The galaxy named them killers, predators, warborn, titles whispered in cautionary tales. But humans had long since stopped correcting the reputation. If the galaxy believed them lethal, then lethal they would be. The outpost command crew exchanged nervous glances. None spoke, none dared. Even among their own species, Holt, Kane, and Ward were known as men carved by conflict rather than diplomacy. They were not the vanguard of peace. They were the edge of humanity's wrath, and the cry for help had summoned them as surely as blood summons sharks. Preparations began swiftly. Marcus coordinated supply routes, requisitioned ammunition with the cold precision of a surgeon. Jarek issued deployment orders, his tone leaving no room for interpretation. Elias checked weapons by muscle memory, his hands caressing steel and carbon like extensions of his body. To them, there was no question of whether they should go. There was only the method of execution. Outside the viewport, the stars shimmered with their usual indifference. 1,000 civilizations might ignore the cry, burying it beneath treaties and fear. But the 3 men knew differently. A challenge had been issued, even if it had not been meant for them. Something in the dark had slaughtered a world, and it had left survivors desperate enough to broadcast to the void. That act alone made them prey, and prey always drew predators. The ship they boarded was lean, predatory, built for infiltration and sudden fury rather than long sieges. Its hull was a patchwork of scars, each marking an encounter survived rather than a defeat endured. When its engines roared to life, the silence of hesitation was broken. Humanity was moving. As coordinates were locked, Marcus spoke with the same detachment he applied to every campaign. If the attackers remain, we're walking into their nest. If they've moved on, we'll find traces. Either way, this ends in blood. Elias chuckled darkly, a sound without mirth. Good. Been too long since I stretched. Jarek said nothing. He stood at the ship's command console, his gaze fixed not on the stars but on the memory of the alien voice. Broken, pleading, yet alive. It had not been meant for them, yet he had taken it personally. That voice had trusted the void to deliver salvation, and now he intended to ensure it did. The galaxy would watch, trembling at the thought of humanity unleashed once more. Whispers would grow, rumors would spread, warnings would be issued in shadowed halls. But all of that came later. For now, 3 men and their crew turned their ship toward the scarred coordinates of a world under siege. The cry for help had been heard, and the deadliest beings in the galaxy were already on their way. You said. The world came into view as a scar across the void. From orbit, the planet was no longer a sphere of life, but a husk etched with fire. Vast stretches of surface lay blackened, cities reduced to molten scars that still glowed faintly against the night. Where oceans once shimmered, patches of steam rose like ghosts, and where forests had stood, nothing but ash fields remained. No signal of organized resistance pulsed back to the ship, only the faint static of broken transmissions clinging to the atmosphere like dying breaths. Commander Jarek Holt stood at the viewport, unmoving, his reflection caught against the glass. Every scar on the planet mirrored one on his memory. He had seen worlds like this before, seen the cruelty that left them gutted. The difference was simple. This time, he had come to answer. His silence radiated purpose, a storm waiting to break. Behind him, Lieutenant Marcus Kane examined the devastation with a strategist's detachment. His tablet scrolled with heat signatures, energy readings, and atmospheric anomalies. Numbers painted a story clearer to him than the ruins themselves. This wasn't random, he said finally. Pattern of orbital strikes suggests intent. Whoever did this wanted survivors. Pockets left alive, bait, maybe. Sergeant Elias Ward leaned against the bulkhead, rifle resting across his chest, helmet cradled under one arm. His expression carried neither shock nor pity. He had walked through charred ruins before, smelled bodies still smoking. Yet his eyes flicked toward the planet with predatory sharpness. If it's bait, he said, we take it anyway. The only trap worth fearing is the one you don't spring hard enough. Jarek turned, his voice a low rumble. We go down. No hesitation. Moments later, the shuttle tore through the atmosphere, fire streaking its hull as it descended into the thick haze of a ruined sky. Ash drifted like snow across the cockpit windows, blotting out sunlight, giving the descent an eerie twilight. The pilot guided them between crumbling skyscrapers, landing on the fractured remains of a plaza. Buildings leaned at unnatural angles, their steel skeletons exposed, their glass shattered into rivers of glittering shards. The ramp hissed open. Heat rolled in. The smell of scorched stone and burned flesh settled on the men like a second skin. Weapons were raised without command. Muscle memory dictated readiness. They advanced with measured steps, boots crunching glass, eyes scanning for movement. Elias moved first, his pace fluid, his rifle sweeping arcs across shadowed corridors. He did not need orders. He hunted through silence as naturally as breathing, his awareness tuned to every echo. Jarek followed, a mountain of presence, the unspoken center of their formation. Marcus lingered slightly behind, eyes fixed on readings from his wrist device, mapping out thermal signatures buried under rubble. It was Marcus who spotted them. A cluster of faint heat flickers in a collapsed transit station. He raised a hand, signaling halt. Elias was already moving toward the broken structure, his steps light despite the weight of his armor. With practiced efficiency, he pried aside a slab of concrete. The sound of movement came from below, quick and frantic, followed by a whimpering murmur in a language none of them understood. Jarek knelt, his scarred face illuminated by the dim glow of emergency lights flickering within the ruin. Eyes, large, hollow, reflecting terror, stared back at him. The survivors were thin, their bodies gaunt and trembling, their skin a pale shade dulled by dust and grief. They shrank back at the sight of him, whispering something among themselves. "They know us," Elias muttered, tone unreadable. "Or, at least, they think they do." The alien's whispers carried fragments of a phrase Marcus's translator struggled to process. One word repeated, however, Deathborn. The name trembled from their lips like a prayer and a curse entwined. Jarek extended a hand. Not soft, not gentle, but steady. "Come out," he commanded. His tone was not one of comfort, but of authority. The kind of tone that left no room for doubt. Hesitation lingered, but desperation outweighed fear, and slowly, cautiously, the survivors crawled into the open. Their leader, or at least the oldest among them, spoke haltingly, their voice cracked from thirst. Marcus's translator adjusted, words forming through static. "They came with machines. They offered safety. Then chains. Then slaughter." The alien pointed weakly toward the distance, where towers of black smoke curled into the sky. "They do not leave until all are broken. We cried to the stars, and you answered." Jarek said nothing at first. His gaze swept the ruins, his silence heavy enough to make the alien tremble further. Then he spoke with the certainty of a man whose decisions were iron. "We'll break them." The alien flinched at the simplicity of the promise. They did not yet understand that to men like Holt, Kane, and Ward, those words were not spoken lightly. Marcus bent down, inspecting a shard of metallic debris lying near the survivors. The piece pulsed faintly with embedded circuitry, its surface smooth and unnatural. "Biomechanical," he muttered. "Not natural war machines. Something engineered to learn." He turned it over, his eyes narrowing. They didn't just want conquest. They're testing tactics, testing prey. Elias spat into the dust. Then they picked the wrong prey this time. His grin was sharp and humorless. The survivors watched, their terror shifting into a fragile mixture of hope and dread. These humans, these Deathborn, had not fled the ruins or wept for pity. They had stepped into the ashes with weapons ready, unshaken, unmerciful. To the aliens, it was salvation in the form of a nightmare. Jarek rose, towering over both the survivors and his men. "Marcus, mark positions of the machines. Elias, prep for hostile contact." He glanced back toward the aliens, his expression unreadable, but his words carried like a verdict. "If something thinks it can butcher and walk away, it has never faced us." The survivors exchanged glances, murmurs fluttering through them like wind. They had begged the galaxy for saviors. What they had received were predators more terrifying than their enemies, predators who had chosen, for reasons beyond comprehension, to stand on their side. In the distance, the faint, metallic shriek of machines echoed across the dead city. Elias's eyes sharpened, his grip tightening on his rifle. "Sounds like they're still here," he said, almost with satisfaction. Jarek's response was calm, resolute. "Good. Then we won't have to hunt far." And as the sound grew closer, rattling the ruins like a drumbeat of war, the survivors realized the truth. Their cry for help had been answered, but the answer carried the shape of vengeance. "You said." The first machine revealed itself with a scream of metal on stone, claws gouging furrows in the broken pavement as it dragged its body into the open. It was taller than a man, its limbs jointed wrong, its carapace shifting with living sinew beneath plates of black alloy. Its eyes were not eyes at all, but pits of red light pulsing with predatory intent. When it screeched, the sound carried the raw edge of steel grinding against steel, a noise designed to unnerve, to strip courage before the strike. Sergeant Elias Ward did not flinch. He dropped to one knee, rifle tight against his shoulder, and placed 3 rounds through the nearest pit of light. The machine's skull burst in a shower of sparks, its body thrashing before collapsing into a convulsing heap. He rose smoothly, smoke curling from his weapon. "One down," he muttered, though his eyes were already searching for the next. They came in numbers. 6, then 10, then more, flowing through the ruins like a tide of blades and metal sinew. Their movements were not random. They advanced in coordinated arcs, flanking positions, driving the humans toward collapse. Marcus Kane watched their approach with a detached calm, his mind dissecting patterns even as claws slashed closer. They adapt fast, he observed, thumbing commands into his wrist pad. They'll swarm if we let them. Jarek, we need to funnel them. Commander Jarek Holt didn't argue. His orders cut through chaos with the same precision as a blade. Ward, hold the left. Kane, light the east corridor. We're breaking them here. His voice carried authority not by volume but by certainty, the kind born from a lifetime of leading men into fire and dragging them out again. Elias moved like a predator unleashed. He flowed through rubble, his rifle spitting fire, his knife flashing when the range collapsed. One machine lunged too close, its claws slashing for his throat. He caught the strike on his forearm guard, shoved upward, and drove his blade into the creature's throat joint. Sparks erupted as he twisted, tearing cables free. He let the body fall and exhaled in satisfaction. They bleed easy enough. Marcus was less visceral, but no less lethal. He planted charges with surgical precision, guiding machines along narrow pathways with bursts of suppressive fire. Each step he took was calculated, each detonation a stitch in the tapestry of the kill zone he was weaving. The ruins became a labyrinth not for the humans but for their enemies, corridors of fire and steel that bent the flow of attackers into concentrated slaughter. Jarek anchored the center, heavy rifle roaring as he advanced deliberately, every step measured. He did not waste bullets. Each shot was a head cord, a limb severed, a machine dropped with finality. Around him, chaos reigned, screams of steel, thunder of gunfire, explosions rattling stone, but within his presence, the line did not break. His men trusted him not because he promised safety, but because he promised victory no matter the cost. The aliens they had rescued watched from the shadows of broken walls. Their wide eyes reflected muzzle flashes, their bodies trembling with terror. To them, the humans were not soldiers but forces of nature. Where the machines came in swarms, fluid and overwhelming, the men stood as predators, savage yet precise, their violence not wild but purposeful. Whispers passed through the survivors. Deathborn, Deathborn, each repetition heavier with awe. The machines adapted. Their next wave came heavier, reinforced with bulkier frames, their limbs studded with integrated weapons. Plasma bolts tore through the air, carving molten scars into stone. One blast caught Elias across the shoulder, spinning him sideways. He gritted his teeth, blood spilling down his arm, but instead of retreating, he growled, "Finally, a fair fight," and hurled himself back into the fray. His fury was not reckless. It was sharpened, channeled, each strike more feral than the last. Marcus marked the new arrivals with a cold efficiency, rerouting his fire to force them into his charges. "They're testing us," he said flatly, even as rubble erupted from detonations. "Learning. Adjusting. This isn't slaughter, it's study." Jarek's answer was a thunderous burst of rifle fire that decapitated two machines in quick succession. "Then let them learn what happens when they choose us as their subject." The fight dragged, each second stretching with the rhythm of survival. Sparks lit the ruins like a storm of fireflies. Machines shrieked, metal tearing, claws rending. Human blood mingled with the black fluid spilling from biomechanical corpses. Yet the line held. More than held, it pushed. Slowly, methodically, Jarek drove his men forward, each kill another step reclaimed from ruin. When the final detonation echoed and the last machine collapsed in twitching ruin, silence returned like a heavy cloak. The city was scarred deeper now, rubble still smoking, corpses mechanical and human alike scattered across the ground. Elias wiped blood from his jaw with the back of his hand, his grin savage despite the wound across his shoulder. That was a warm-up. Marcus crouched beside one of the shattered machines, his hands tracing exposed circuitry, his eyes sharp with analysis. This wasn't their full strength. Scouts, maybe. Probing force. He looked toward Jarek, his tone cold, absolute. Something bigger is coming. Jarek stood over the battlefield, the smoke curling around him like a mantle. His gaze swept the ruins, then lifted to the dark horizon. His silence lingered until it pressed into the air like iron. At last he spoke, each word forged from certainty. Then we'll break that, too. The aliens crept from their hiding places, staring at the humans not with relief, but with awe edged by fear. They had prayed for saviors, and what had arrived were monsters in flesh. Monsters who fought not with mercy, but with unrelenting ferocity. Salvation had come, yes, but it had come clad in blood and thunder. Far away, deep within the smoke-choked streets, another sound stirred, a heavier thrum, low and resonant, like the heartbeat of something vast awakening. Elias's grin faded into something sharper, hungrier. "Hear that?" he said quietly. "That's the real fight walking our way." And the survivors realized the nightmare was only beginning. "You said." The ruins quaked as the deeper resonance grew nearer, a sound so heavy it seemed to vibrate in bone. The smaller machines had been vicious, adaptive, dangerous, but this was different. This was deliberate, confident, like a predator striding into a kill it had already decided was its own. Dust trickled down from fractured towers, rubble shifted, and then the behemoth came into view. It emerged through a collapsed avenue, tearing aside broken stone, as if clearing a stage. Twice the height of a man, its body fused with metal and flesh, the sinew pulsing beneath armored plating. Its arms ended in claws long enough to shear a man in half, and its central eye burned crimson, sweeping across the ruins with malignant intelligence. Smaller drones scuttled in its shadow, the remnants of its pack, but it was the thing itself that froze the air. Commander Jarek Holt raised his rifle, but did not fire. His eyes narrowed, reading the creature's stance, the deliberate pace of its advance. This was not a scout. This was a commander, a construct built not merely to slaughter, but to dominate. He knew instinctively. Kill this, and the rest would break. Fail, and the city would drown in steel again. Beside him, Lieutenant Marcus Kane marked its movements with clinical focus. His wrist pad filled with data, readings spiking with every step the machine took. "Energy signatures are off the scale," he said, voice steady. "Its core isn't standard. This isn't just a commander. It's a prototype." He looked up, eyes cold as glass. "If it survives this battle, they'll make more." Sergeant Elias Ward spat blood into the dust, his grin jagged beneath the gash across his cheek. "Then we don't let it survive. Simple math." He slammed a fresh magazine into his rifle, the sound echoing sharp against the silence before the storm. The machine roared. The noise was a furnace of iron, so loud the air seemed to shudder. It charged. Jarek fired first, controlled bursts hammering into the crimson eye. Sparks flared, metal dented, but the creature did not falter. Marcus triggered his planted charges, rubble collapsing to funnel the beast into a narrow kill zone. The explosion staggered it, slowed its momentum, but still it advanced, claws raking stone to shreds. Elias met it head-on. He darted low, rolling beneath a sweeping strike, his blade flashing as he drove it into exposed sinew between armored plates. Black fluid sprayed, burning his arm with chemical heat, but he twisted the knife deeper before tearing free. The machine shrieked, a sound that rattled every shattered wall. Elias grinned through the pain. "See? It bleeds." The fight became a storm of brutality. Jarek anchored the line, every round precise, stripping away the beast's armor piece by piece. Marcus guided its path with detonations, his mind 3 moves ahead, turning ruin into weapon. Elias circled like a wolf, striking at weak points, teeth bared in fury, bloodied but relentless. The aliens watched from cover, unable to look away. Each strike the humans made seemed impossible, their defiance unthinkable. Where the galaxy's armies would have retreated before such a monstrosity, These 3 men drove forward, not with desperation but with certainty. They did not fight like prey. They fought like rivals. The machine adapted quickly, countering with sudden bursts of speed, its claws carving deep into stone. One strike caught Jarek across the chest plate, slamming him back into rubble. Pain lanced through him, but he forced himself upright, rifle still in hand. His voice cut across the battlefield, iron even through the blood. "Hold the line." Marcus moved with ruthless calculation. He sprinted across open ground, planting his last charge beneath a crumbling spire. "Ward, drive it here," he barked. Elias didn't question. He fired into the creature's eye, drawing its rage, then baited it with calculated steps, dodging claws by inches, leading it toward the trap. The spire toppled as Marcus triggered the charge, stone and steel crashing down upon the machine. Dust engulfed the street, the noise like thunder rolling across the ruins. For a moment, silence. Then movement. The creature rose from the wreckage, wounded but not finished, its central eye blazing brighter than before. Jarek spat blood and lifted his rifle again. "Then we finish it the hard way." Elias lunged, his knife finding the pulsing core exposed beneath cracked plating. He drove it in with both hands, teeth bared in a snarl, even as claws tore across his armor, shredding metal and flesh. Sparks and fire erupted as Marcus fired a final round into the exposed wound, his shot sinking deep. The machine convulsed. Its roar shattered into static, its limbs thrashing in chaotic arcs. Then, with a shudder that seemed to shake the city itself, it collapsed, smoke and black ichor spilling across the rubble. Elias staggered back, blood soaking his side, but his grin did not falter. "Told you it bleeds." The battlefield fell silent. Smoke drifted upward, mingling with the ash-choked sky. Around them, the smaller drones twitched once, then stilled, their power fading with the death of their commander. The survivors crept forward, their fear warping into something more complex, fear still, but tinged with reverence. They looked at the humans not as rescuers, but as entities of destruction who had, for reasons beyond comprehension, chosen to fight on their behalf. The word passed through them again, whispered with trembling voices, "Deathborn." Marcus crouched by the wreckage, his fingers brushing the shattered core. His face was expressionless, but his words were edged in steel. This wasn't conquest. It was reconnaissance. They wanted to see how resistance responds. And now they've seen us. He rose, turning to Jarek. "More will come. Bigger, smarter. And they'll be ready for everything, except us." Jarek stood tall despite the blood seeping from his chest wound, his rifle hanging loose in his hand. His gaze swept the survivors, the ruins, the distant horizon where smoke still rose. His voice was quiet but heavy enough to command the air. "Then we'll be ready, too." Elias chuckled through gritted teeth, pressing a hand to his side. "Good. I'd hate for this to be the last dance." The alien stared, realizing their cry for help had not brought mercy. It had brought something the galaxy feared far more. Men who did not retreat, men who turned slaughter into promise, men who carried the title of monsters and wore it proudly. Word would spread. Across councils and empires, across fleets and stations, whispers would grow into warnings. Humanity had heard the call. Humanity had answered. And when predators came hunting, humans did not run, they hunted back. In the silence that followed, Jarek lifted his gaze to the stars, his expression unreadable. For the first time, perhaps, he felt the weight of what was to come. Not the battle just fought, but the war that was inevitable. The cry for help had been answered. And the galaxy now knew the most lethal beings alive were listening still.